And I think we're good to go. Sorry for the delay, everyone. I was hanging out in the wrong session together with another 10 people. I'd never pushed a button to join this session, so I was in the last one, which for some strange reason stays open. So in any case, I'm going to make it a little quicker here since we lost a couple of minutes, but at least everyone's here. My name is Hubert Zaitchik. I run Health Wildcatters, and I'll help ask some of the questions. Meanwhile, everyone here that's listening, you can ask questions in the click on track sessions under chat, and then you're going to be typing questions that will actually land in our inbox here. Looks like we lost JR here. But I'm going to go ahead and start with the introductions. I'm going to start off with Andrew. Andrew is Managing Director and Chief Financial Officer at Scientific Health Development, a boutique investment firm focused on early stage innovative medical technology and products. And Andrew joined SHD from VMG Health, where he was a senior analyst and associate. He's got his MBA cum laude from, magna cum laude BBA in finance from Mays. And is a CFA as well, and lives in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, obviously. And then next is Tim van Truren. Say your name. Say your last name for me.
Van Truren.
Van Truren.
Yeah.
Okay. I gave you the Austrian slant there. Truren. Yeah.
That works.
Okay. Yeah, it works. It's even more mysterious. Tim is an analyst with BIOS Partners, joined in 2019, and is responsible for the due diligence flow and the incoming deal flow at BIOS, and has a PhD in biomedical sciences with a cancer biology emphasis from University of North Texas, and obviously puts that to good use at BIOS Partners. And last but not least, JR Garcia. I can't not look at JR and smile. It's one of my partners. JR joined Green Park and Golf in 2011 and is also responsible for sourcing and evaluating early stage startups. Master negotiator, creates win-win situations in any scenario. And spent time with FedEx, Bold Ventures, Lone Star Investment Advisors before that. Got his MBA from a little school called Cox School of Business at SMU. Sounds familiar to me. I did the same thing there. And his undergrad at Notre Dame in finance. So this is our panel. And we're obviously going to be talking about startup financing. Just to fill you in, we just had a session. The session before this was with startup entrepreneurs. It was Toby Zutz, it was Sunny Nadolski, and Kobe Amoa. And you might have dealt with those three startups before. And then our session before that was Michael Gordon telling the Teladoc story. So anyone that stayed with us on the track, those were the three pieces. But it's good for you to know because those are some reference points that might show up on the questions. So I would like to go ahead though with having each of you describe your firms a little bit and what you're interested in, and anything you want to mention that's worth mentioning, just kind of to set the stage for our next question. So maybe we'll start with Andrew. You can tell us a little bit about SHD and what you guys have done and are looking for now.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Hubert. First, thank you for my honorary MBA, which I definitely have not earned yet. So Thank you for that. Always nice to pad the resume.
MBA, sorry.
But thank you for the intro. SHD has been around since 2006. But the genesis of the fund actually came much earlier. Phil Romano, who's one of our general partners, is the outside money responsible for what became the original Stent. And so that's kind of the original genesis of how SHD came to be. But over the last 13, 14 years, we have kind of carved out a niche for ourselves, really in med tech specifically, but more broadly, we do invest in a variety of life sciences, from med devices to diagnostics. We have done some pharma biotech deals as well. We are a small fund, as Hubert mentioned, Dallas-based. We just finished up investing out of our third fund. Each of our funds has been between 15 and just over 20 million in commitments. So in the grand scheme of things, small funds, but we like to take direct ownership and add strategic value where we can. So usually taking board seats and playing a more active role than a lot of people that invest with similar size funds than ourselves.
Okay. Are you anything in specific you guys are interested right now, or anything you can talk about just to add on the past, current?
So our focus has mostly been on med tech recently, but that said, we have diagnostics that take forms of med tech devices. So things in that realm are also interesting. And I should mention the size of investments we normally are looking at. We're earlier stage, I'd say. We're not necessarily investing in napkin drawings, but we like to get involved in an early state where we can help kind of guide the company path. So, that in terms of dollars, that might mean we're making, an initial investment of $500,000, could be $1.5 million, and then we are supportive throughout the life cycle of companies as long as we have capital available.
Got it. Okay, let's switch over to Tim.
Yeah, so I'm with BIOS Partners, and we bill ourselves at times as a small fund, but I guess it's relative to who you're talking about, right? So we have about 250 million under management right now, and we are in the middle of raising our third fund, targeting somewhere between 100 and 150 million. We have been investing since about 2013. Our managing partners founded BIOS through kind of like a group investment. They found each other through an angel network here in Fort Worth called Cowtown Angels. There was an ophthalmology deal that came through, and one of our founding partners is an expert in ophthalmology. She worked at Alcon for 20 plus years, so really knew the space, saw it was a great opportunity. They rounded up some friends and family and invested in Encore Vision and exited with a 10X about 3 years later. And so from there, they started doing fund investing. So like I said, we're in the middle of our third fund right now. To date, we've invested in about 13 companies. And we focus mostly on therapeutics. So we're not, we have a couple of devices in our portfolio, but that really isn't our area of expertise. And so we're kind of looking more towards the small molecule, cell therapy, that kind of stuff. So we've invested in ophthalmology, oncology, dermatology. One of the crazy people to invest in early stage Alzheimer's company that we're really excited about. So yeah.
Excellent. Great. And then JR.
Yeah, good afternoon. As Hubert mentioned, Green Park and Golf started in about 2011, give or take. Really started investing in 2012, 13, after we kind of found what we really wanted to do was invest directly into early stage companies. So, like Andrew, or like Tim, we invest broadly in healthcare. Across medical devices, therapeutics, and some software that is not on the wellness kind of app side, but on powering big enterprises, powering hospitals, more B2B type of diagnostics. So we also invest across a breadth of stages. So everything from true startup, company formation. All the way to Series C, Series D, crossover type of stuff into public companies. And that's because we're not a traditional fund. We're a family office that kind of grew, and we do have one fund that is there reserved for follow-on rounds, but we take each individual company and investment on a deal by deal, and so that allows us great flexibility, allows us to look at a lot. Initial investments ranging from $250,000 to $3 million, but probably $0.5 to $1.5 million is our sweet spot. And that's us. It's 4 people here in Dallas, and then 2 partners recently added on about a year ago down in Houston, and they do roughly the same thing that we do under the GPG umbrella. So every once in a while we'll stray outside of the healthcare, but healthcare is about 85-90% of our portfolio to date, and we've invested in about 80 companies now, lifetime to date, with about 55 currently active, with the rest kind of either being exited or public, or shut the doors or whatever. So just given the number, we don't take board seats too often, but take a lot of board observer seats, and really are active depending upon the company and what the entrepreneur might need.
Okay. Very good. Well, that gives a good overview. Hi, Run Health Blockheaders. We invest $30,000. Couldn't help it. Had to add that. But as an accelerator, obviously we've dealt and know all of these investors, because they are very often looking at companies that are either out of accelerators early stage, or maybe not the seed round, but the next round thereafter. And for all of you who are listening, these are 3 active healthcare investors in the DFW market. So this is a very important point to make during Dallas Startup Week. We don't have too many venture capital family offices that can place 7-digit investments, and especially then keep up with follow-on rounds. But these are 3 that are well regarded, have done really well for themselves, and are premier examples. So we need more of them, but this is a very, very good panel to have here today. So thanks you all for joining. I think one of the things that everybody's always interested in is to hear a story about a recent company maybe that you looked at, that you invested in, and maybe one of those, and maybe one of your exits that you would like to highlight, that gives a little bit of the flavor of what you have previously invested in. And I know all of you have had some prominent exits or exits in the works, but I'll let you choose which one you might want to talk about. Maybe Andrew, you want to start off? I guess SHD's story starts with a couple of big bangs there, right?
Yeah, I wish SHD itself could take credit for the stint story, but I can't say that. But maybe a good example of a deal we're very excited about is a company called Sight Sciences. It's in our second fund. It actually is pivoted from, since when we first invested, was actually a theme amongst most companies, as I'm sure JR and Tim can vouch for. But it originally started as an eye implant that would be originally intended to treat glaucoma. We've since moved on and realized that the application of that implant was was actually providing therapy in itself, and it's durable. And so now we don't leave any implant behind. And that company has now raised significant additional capital from big name investors, which is one of the ways we kind of get our validation along the way until you get to these exit points. And has ramped up, has hired dozens of sales reps, and is increasing their revenue year over year at a pretty strong clip, even through COVID, which tried to make our lives difficult for a couple of months. I think they've already mostly recovered in their sales process from that. and they're doing at least as much, if not more, revenue than they were prior to COVID on a monthly basis. So we're really excited about that company, but it's a good example. We got in, we co-led the initial Series A round. We've been on the board for the entirety of that company and watched it grow from a very small company into what it is today, and hopefully will continue to grow into the future into something big.
Okay, that's cool. Tim, I know you mentioned Encore, but you can choose Encore or any other company.
Yeah, Encore is probably our most public, most well-known, started the whole thing. But one company I do want to highlight is Lantern Pharma. They just had an IPO pretty recently, and that was just a really great win for the team. I wasn't a part of that deal or didn't do any of the work on it, but from what I hear, it was a really great testimony to the team here and just their ability to work through some issues and take a zero to a hero. So we're pretty proud of that one. And as far as a recent deal that we've done, we were involved in the Series A for Taysha Gene Therapies, which is a gene therapy startup out of UT Southwestern. They recently closed a follow-on round with some banks, and we're really excited about Taysha and the potential for that platform, and just for the high unmet needs that they're addressing, rare orphan indications, and I think that really also highlights our process in sourcing deals, and we got that one through the grapevine through a really weird email to one of our managing partners, and we were in on the ground floor even before the management team was in place. So yeah, we're really excited about that one.
Never heard about Lantern before. Just kidding. Of course, that's one of our portfolio companies. JR, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I can vouch for the test, for the hard work BIOS does. Also part of Lantern, and happy to see them there. Let's mention one good outcome for us. We had another company called Similar Scientific that went public in much the same manner as Lantern, right? More as a fundraising exercise, not a liquidity event. And it took several years, but ultimately proved out to be a very nice kind of 10x return for our investors. And when we got in, so from a Series A straight to an IPO back in 2013 and 14, and it's a medical device, nothing too fancy, but helps assess risk, and does a digital ankle brachial index test, and so that's one that just turned out really well. Took one round of financing, and then went straight to public markets, which we held for a number of years past that as well. So that's kind of one example. Another one, something that we're fairly excited about, is a company called Mission Bio, and they do single cell barcoding and analysis, and so we've been in their Series A, B, and C, all three rounds, and they've taken like $110 million now. But it's a life science tool, so they're in the market, headquartered in California. So we're not too active in that anymore, but just kind of giving an example of the kind of deals we can do, and continue to follow on and support companies through several rounds, even though we're not a traditional fund. So it's one that we like a lot, and it's one that's in revenue stage, so we can start tracking that quarter to quarter, and kind of probably two good examples out there of what's possible with us and what we like to see.
Sounds good. I want to remind all of our audience that you can ask questions on the right side in the chat function. If you click on track session, then that's the actual session. If you chat on the event, you're going to be talking to everyone in the whole DSW. But track session chat is going to go to us, and we're actually going to see, and we can weave those questions in to the conversation here. I guess, going on the assumption that a lot of our listeners are in the startup world, healthcare startups, and probably some of the people that we've prior had in some of the sessions. I'd like to hear a little bit about, maybe in general terms, what you're looking for in a startup when they first approach you, and what are some of your best practices, or what excites you, and let's be clear here. In many cases, they may not be a fit for you yet, right? So they just got started, they're early, they're often shy about not wanting to waste your time. On the other hand, they also know that it's often a good idea to establish relationships early and keep you abreast of information. So I'll add from my end that we advise startups to establish relevant relationships with funders that could potentially have an interest in their area, or maybe even a stated interest in their area, and then to keep feeding information every month or whatever, quarterly, but ideally every month, in some sort of a newsletter to say, here's where we are right now. Now we're raising a seed round. To keep that kind of in front of those respective people that they might want to establish a relationship with. Sometimes nothing happens out of that, but sometimes it's exactly that, establishing a track record of trust that then leads to a conversation when the time is right. But from your end, and really, you just raise your hand and I'll pick you. We don't have to go in the same order every single time. A couple of things you're looking for in a startup when you first engage that impress you, that you wish everyone was doing, or that are, you think, best practices. Anyone?
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, I think, when you're looking at med devices, I think there's a ton of things we have to look at to get kind of that initial light bulb to go off and think, these guys might be onto something. And this is something that you have to think initially about how it's going to play out a long time from now. Going through these regulatory processes can take years in some cases. In most cases, I should say. And so what we really like to look at are deals that are not only, they're not only hitting a large unmet need or a huge pain point, but it's really something that providers, payers, and patients can all benefit from. There's a lot of things out there now that are nice to haves that cost a little bit more, might make the physician's life a little easier or a little bit faster. That's a pretty hard sell, though, in today's environment with costs the way they are. So to really get excited about something, if you can prove that there may already be existing reimbursement for what you're doing, you have a 510K path that allows you to get to an approval a little bit quicker than a PMA might, but you're distinct enough and different enough that there's a true value proposition. Very importantly, that you also can do so at a price point that's going to help the entire system. And so one of the things that we've seen a little bit of a theme on that is if you can move a procedure that's typically done in an OR into a physician's office, that provides a lot of economics around the table that makes something look really, really attractive.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say for us, we're focused on therapeutics, as I've already outlined. So, I mean, ideally, we'd like to see some proof of concept data. We like to address unmet needs, and so we tend to stay away from areas with a lot of competition. We call them Me Too drugs when something has already, made the market and there's 2 or 3 of them out there. They all do the same thing and they have this massive market. We're not interested in stuff like that. We're looking for very novel approaches, thinking outside the box. And one thing I'd be remiss if I didn't mention is that, I see all the incoming deal flow. I see every slide deck that comes through our firm, and it has to be clear. It has to be clear. It has to be concise for me to be able to really get interested in something from the beginning. You know, stuff like stuff not being lined up well, or you know, these little tiny details are really important to me to show that, you know, whoever put it together is serious about what they're doing, is really passionate about what they're doing.
Yeah, I just echo Tim a little bit. You know, seeing decks or presentations come across, and we're fairly data driven. And you know, depending on the stage, that can mean different things. But as long as you put that together in a very clear, logical way, you know, that is always a very important aspect for us. And it doesn't mean we can't go early. It just means we're looking for different things, you know, rather than later stage. So, and that, you know, that goes for therapeutics, goes for devices, even the software companies. You know, we like to see probably a little product market fit there, you know, in software. So, you know, having some traction, having some customers, and then someone who's kind of knowing, you know, how to do more of that, right? And really knowing the details of their business. You know, Hubert, to your point, you know, it is a series of conversations and getting comfortable, you know, with a team, an entrepreneur. And so, you know, many times, you know, we start building a folder, you know, that could take the better part of a year, right? And just getting updates and doing information and just kind of seeing them evolve, you know, maybe sitting out their seed round or their friends and family round. But, you know, coming back around and when they're ready for, you know, a bigger round, we can kind of go back and look at that historical information and kind of, you know, build our case. And so I think it's, you know, very important to keep that up and be consistent in your communication there.
Okay. Yeah, that's all good advice. And it's I think one of the things that's hardest to do for a startup on their own, doing it for the first time, is to know, well, what is it that really is supposed to be on this executive summary or on the slide deck or on the part of that 5-minute pitch? You can read books all you want about it, but ultimately somebody that knows can look it over and kind of give you some hints. And I couldn't agree more with the statement on clarity. I get deals all the time as well, and I'm reading through it and I don't understand what's going on here. And I don't know, sometimes it's because somebody wanted to sound really, really educated. I mean, I can do educated. I got a couple of degrees, but that doesn't do anything for me. Just tell me what it is and spit it out.
I think part of that too is, you know, if you're working on something and it's your baby and it's your project, you know it better than anyone else. And so when you go to try to explain it to someone, you're starting up here when you need to start at the very beginning. So it's important to keep in mind when you're trying to present something to someone who's never seen it, they don't have the background that you do in it. They don't have the basis. So start at the beginning, explain stuff that you don't think needs to be explained, and be very clear.
I couldn't agree more. We do a lot of that because it's very difficult to do, and you need honest and friendly feedback to get there. Let's see, on the questions here, we have a question from Enrique on COVID. So let's pivot over there and see the COVID pandemic has affected public grants for innovation drastically, switching the interest exclusively towards pandemic startup solution. Does this happen in private investment ventures? How can we identify ventures? How we can identify ventures that decide to switch interest? All right, the last bit I'm not sure I totally understand, but you guys see the question too?
Yeah.
Anyway, well, let's just take the COVID piece. And from my end, I'll add number one. Yes, we see, of course, COVID central startups. No, it doesn't mean we're only doing COVID. Yes, there are some rushing, James, to your point, there's some rushing towards COVID. And I've seen some that try to use their old deck and now it's all about COVID. And I'm holding my head because no, we're not investors trying to just chase whatever the shiny object is. It needs to have longevity. That said, some of you might have some interesting ventures where COVID doesn't affect you, or certainly doesn't affect you in a negative way, which is important to point out. Healthcare has already a little bit of a halo because in general terms, I've not seen a downturn. If anything, I've seen an uptick of healthcare investment and interest in healthcare investment. But I'll shut up here and switch over anyway. Open mic on COVID and how it's affected maybe deal flow and maybe investment from your point of view.
Yeah, I would just say that COVID, I mean, you're right. There's a ton of attention on COVID and rightfully so, but we aren't investing just for the next 6 months, year, 18 months. What we do is a long-term investment plan. And typically we're getting into an investment that isn't going to materialize into some kind of exit. It might be 5 years on average. It might be 7 years. So to only focus on COVID, I think would be a short-sighted mistake. That said, if you have a company that's working on a technology that somehow has a COVID application, I think you have to give it the attention that it's due, as long as it's not also going to be a distraction for your company.
Yeah, and I think that the distraction point is something that we've seen a lot. I mean, we see a lot of incoming deal flow that is throwing something against the wall, trying to use the COVID-19 headliner to gauge interest, but you know that doesn't really work, because once somebody gets in and starts looking at the company, I mean, we're going to look at everything, and so if it doesn't make any sense to go after COVID, then it's kind of a pointless thing. So, I mean, we haven't really done a whole lot with COVID. You know, we actually, probably the best email I've received was someone who a couple of weeks ago emailed and said that they developed a COVID vaccine in their apartment, and they were trying to figure out if we would help them with the development. So, I mean, it has been some crazy stuff coming across.
Okay. In their defense, though, they might know the Encore story. And if you know the Encore story, you know about garages on the border to Canada. And because I'm very well aware that was a garage story.
Yeah.
So, right, Tim?
That is true, but this one was a little less legit than that.
I think Lubec, Canada, Maine, right on the border to Canada, like in the boonies. That's where the technology was refined in a garage. Remember the story. Anyway, yeah, I get your point. Yeah, so yeah, I get some crazy stuff too. Let's see, we got a couple more questions here. There's one on, and it's true, it just occurred to me too, you know, anything regarding digital health, telehealth, or anything along the side of software startups. Can any of you opine on whether you invest in any of those, and if you do, what you're looking for, interested in?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it, you know, briefly about, you know, software startups needing some traction, usually for us, you know, that someone's willing to pay for it and find value there. I mean, I think, you know, generally you're seeing some increased adaption by both consumers and care providers, you know, on telehealth or, you know, virtual options and technologies. So, you know, I think, you know, we do see that. I think we see a lot more generalist investors, you know, coming into that area as well. And, you know, this kind of ties into the COVID. I think you're seeing a lot of dollars kind of flow into I don't want to say the fringes of healthcare, you know, but that specific element, you know, telehealth and tech and software. And so, I mean, I think there's going to be a general awareness and probably net bigger dollars kind of thrown to that. But I think it's probably going to be a little bit of the later stage opportunities and people who have shown the ability to attract customers and grow them. So I think that's what we've probably seen. And we ourselves have done a couple of software investments this year, but they've kind of tended to be a little bit later stage than our other, you know, med tech or therapeutic investments this year.
Okay. And that question, by the way, was by Zainab Chip Chandler. I always try to at least give a shout out to our audience that's brave enough to ask questions. So thank you. Let's see, we got another one here. Could a few of you discuss the terms settled with some of the startups your firms ended up investing in? Well, that's by John Kenny. I don't know, anything to share? Maybe share something that was a concession you made that was a little bit more interesting, or not sure how that would.
I mean, I'll just take a quick stab. Try and keep it pretty simple. I mean, don't want to get too cute. I mean, because we're investing, like Andrew said, for many, many years, right? We're expecting multiple rounds. And so we don't try to get too complex in terms of, you know, liquidation preferences or dividends or things like that. I mean, we know rounds are coming. So it's just, it really is aligning incentives, and that's aligning the option pool, the employee stake, the investor stake. I mean, it's more about aligning incentives rather than trying to, you know, have fancy terms. I'll let Andy.
Yeah, I think it's important to have reasonable expectations based on where your company is, and have really put thought into the projected growth of your company and subsequent rounds of dilution before you actually could make it to an exit. If you're coming to me with an indication that might only be a 100 million addressable market, and so you think that means you get to sell for $500 million one day, so it's your Series A and you think you're worth $50 million, I think that's a tough sell. So I think it's important to just have reasonable expectations and kind of plot out the future, so that way you can be within a range that makes sense for whatever investors you're talking to, whether you're planning on proposing those or waiting for terms to be proposed to you. That way you're at least within a ballpark that makes sense for a financial investor.
Yeah, that's a good point. So there's another question from Daniel Waldman. How would you rank Dallas in terms of health technology entrepreneurship relative to regions like Minneapolis, Boston, California? Any opinions on that? I know you guys do deals all over the place, and actually Health Wildcatters too take startups from all over the place. So any opinions on where entrepreneurship is there activity here that's decent or comparable in any way?
Yeah, well, I mean, part of our thesis is actually looking in kind of central U.S. Flyover states. So we try to actually avoid the biotech hubs like Boston and in California, and a large portion of that is because of the high valuations that the geography gives to those companies. We look at government funding through grants. It's heavily concentrated in the middle of the country, and so we know that there's good science and good products coming out of the middle of the country, but they're underfunded by the venture capital. So we see kind of the middle of the country, Dallas, Minneapolis, areas like that, as good value for investments. Just as good technology, but a little less valued.
Yeah, I mean, we invest. We're geographically agnostic. I mean, we invest in U.S. companies, but we'll invest in companies anywhere across the state, across the country. That said, without specifically focusing on non-Dallas deals or non-Texas deals, it does seem that more deals that we end up closing are on either one of the coasts or in Minneapolis. And to your point, and I don't. This is an age-old question. I feel like every time we get together, we're able to talk about this a little bit. The reason why I can't tell you. I don't know if it's if there's just a longer established ecosystem, if it's just a risk tolerance type of thing. We have great facilities here. We have great research here. I think, at least from where we sit, because we're not trying to invest in the napkin idea in most cases, it's moving it from idea or very early research into an actual company before we will invest in most cases. And I think that seems to be what I see as lacking locally. I think, and I don't know if you guys would agree with that or not, but there's any number of reasons that I wish I understood better as to why Dallas doesn't quite have the deal flow, at least in what we're looking for, that the coasts in Minneapolis might.
Yeah, I can't answer it either. And I mean, there's good stuff coming out of Dallas. I certainly think it's not comparable in density to those other mentioned areas, but Dallas has a fairly significant footprint, the fourth largest metro area in the country. And so even if our density level of deals is lower, there's quite a bit of volume. There's a pretty concentration. So it's a decent level of activity that comes out of here. And so I think we're definitely behind those centers. That said, I think on the financing side or on the deal reasonability side, deals are more fairly valued here. And now I think at least can find some financing in the region as well, which used to be a big no-no, can't do. And I think we see some of that now. We got another question from Varika Pinam. What do you look for if the founders don't have healthcare background? I've seen some funds explicitly ask for that. So she's, sorry, Varika, I assume you're a woman, but so she was wondering about that. And let me know if I'm wrong, Varika. I'll correct myself.
I mean,
So founders healthcare experience. Do you need any?
I mean, you need a passion and you need expertise in that area. Whether that's formal education or not. I mean, something we want to see that you really know this. Know the field. And just an example. A local company, Microtransponder, is led by a lawyer and been CEO for several years, but has done a really great job of really knowing neuromodulation, stimulation, and surrounding himself with the right partners, whether it be on the regulatory side or the technology side or, the patient care, KOL, clinician side. And so it's not a requisite, but, just make sure you're doing your best you can to educate yourself and then surround yourself with the people and listen to them. So, I think if you go in eyes wide open and know your limitations, then that's something to overcome, but it can be.
I couldn't agree more. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that, but it's certainly, if there's no healthcare expertise on board, then it's good for, number one, to be aware that that's a potential problem, and then surround yourself with people who are, whether it's your advisory board, co-founder, board members, but you do need to have that covered. You will be asked about it, and your investors don't want to be the ones that teach you everything about how to run the healthcare part of that company. So we have a couple more questions. We can maybe combine them. Pamela is asking about how would you rank Dallas in terms of digital healthcare investments relative to Houston, TMC. And Jennifer, hey Jennifer. Jennifer is asking, what would you suggest universities and colleges do to build a stronger pipeline for talent in the North Texas innovation? What would you like to see? What would help? So the first question is easy to answer. This is Dallas Startup Week. So Houston who? What? No, sorry. We love Houston. It's Pamela, I'll take that one off the table because I don't think this is the panel to answer. But I'm not sure I can answer that. Houston has a formidable ecosystem. We've got lots of deals out of Houston that we've invested in. I think everyone sees good deals out of Houston. Great city, great innovation. Not sure how to compare the two. Both have good strengths. And overall, I would say within Texas, there's certainly a little bit of an advantage, meaning more likely to invest in a deal that has Texas roots, maybe over another one. So I think there's a little bit of kinship within the state, but I wouldn't want to pit the two against each other because I wouldn't have the numbers. Austin would play a role as well in that equation because Austin has some good digital health traction. So let's pivot a little bit to Jennifer's question on universities. Anything that you would like to see that universities could do to help with deal flow, education, innovation support, something you don't see yet? Jennifer's at SMU, in case you didn't know that.
That's a tough question to answer. I mean, it'd be great if there was some kind of partnering work that schools could do with local employers that are healthcare focused to get them experience prior to, whether it's part of coursework or something like that. If they could have some level of experience rather than just throwing them to the wolves saying good luck when you graduate, I think that would be helpful. But this also ties back into the whole ecosystem thing. There's a less dense level of healthcare focused companies locally than there are in other areas. So you don't have the opportunity to partner with quite as many groups as you would in other areas. But I think that would be something that would be helpful.
Yep. Anybody else?
I mean, Western's doing a much better job recently with technology transfer and maybe Tim has experience with Keisha and we have funded a few things out of Southwestern here that's been very, very early, but so I think there's some momentum and even seeing some financial momentum as well, with Peloton and some other companies. Then you're seeing some secret money, as well, get used, directly into companies, which is also, good for not just Dallas, but, good for Texas, especially on the therapeutic side. So, there's some things they can always, get better on and do, but I think, recently they've done some very good benchmarking and other macro effects that, have kind of propelled, entrepreneurs and entrepreneurialism, faster further here.
Yeah, and I think it just comes down to education and getting to undergrads and graduate students and just showing them that there are other opportunities than working in a lab the rest of your life or writing grants the rest of your life. We have an undergrad internship program every summer. We also try to be available for graduate students to just talk about what we do and what that healthcare startup looks like and just try to educate as much as possible.
Yeah, agreed. That's definitely, and also to your point, GR, by the way, plug for tomorrow, Claire Aldrich will be on a panel talking about the Dallas startup ecosystem, which includes digital health, but also, of course, pharma, medical devices. So Claire Aldrich runs tech transfer for UT Southwestern. On the second panelist will be Steve Gingrich of UTD. Steve has had several roles at UTD and is also a great resource, great collaborator. So both fantastic people, great institutions, as is SMU with Jennifer, who's on here right now. So trying to raise awareness around the various ecosystem players is important. We'll do some of that tomorrow. And the hope is that we will, everyone has a different fit, so that we're creating enough of these to also have the follow-on entrepreneurship wave that should follow those support systems. I don't think it's easy to plan for any of this, but we're seeing at least some of the right steps right now. And the most important is deal flow that's active, like you described, JR. In our case, out of UT Southwestern, I know also out of UNT Health Science Center and the other universities, UTD, UTA, UNT, all creating some good research and output. And I think communicating within the group is the most important thing we can do to encourage entrepreneurs to step out of that bubble of the university and go outside a few steps. I think we're going to have to close it up here. I know there was another question from Kevin about industrial space. I'm not sure, Kevin, I have a good answer for you. Anybody know about industrial month-to-month light industrial space that you can rent month-to-month? I don't have a quick fire answer. Anyway, Kevin, my email is hubert@healthlawcatters. You can email me there. We'll see if we can find something for you. But there are 2 more sessions tomorrow, so we can reconnect there as well. So for now, I just want to thank everyone, thank our panelists, and for your insight, for your time, for your gift of sharing your insights, all of our audience, which unfortunately I cannot see in this format. I just see a little number on top, and I know how many eyeballs. I assume it's twice as many eyeballs as 47. So unless we're all cyclopses. In any case, 47 people on here right now. Thank you, everyone, for following along. And again, tomorrow, 2 more sessions in the healthcare track. Have a great rest of the week. Lots of other cool stuff happening in Dallas Startup Week. So many other tracks. Check them out. And see you tomorrow on the healthcare track again. Thank you. Bye-bye.